My name's Matt McDermott, founder of Matter. Welcome to our third edition now of Spotlight On. So we should be hopefully live, and you can see me through LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Today, our topic of conversation is growth and change ahead. Apologies, this was meant to run last week, so forgive us for that. But already in the last week, lots of change actually already gone ahead. So without kind of further ado, before introducing a couple of our panelists for today, just some simple housekeeping. You'll all see a comment section, whichever platform you're using. Do get involved on this if you have any questions, comments for our discussion. We'd be happy to field any questions and hopefully give you some answers to maybe some of the challenges that you're facing at the moment. So with that, I'll introduce both of our panelists for today. So we've got a couple of familiar faces. We'll give a brief intro.
So hi, good afternoon everybody. My name is Andrew Richards. I'm CEO of a multi-academy trust in Leicestershire. I've been in, this is my second CEO post. I also work in as advisor to a comms and creative marketing agency as well. And it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Brilliant, thank you, Andrew. And Tim.
Hi everybody. Look, thank you, Matt, for inviting me back. I wasn't sure if I was going to get a second go after the first one, but it's good to be back. I'm Tim Plumb. I'm the CEO of PolyMAT, a small multi-academy trust in Thamesmead and Greenwich in London, and very much looking forward to the discussion today. And hoping for some questions, because this is a period of great uncertainty, but hopefully we can kind of talk our way through it, because actually I think that a lot of the answers to getting through the uncertainty that we might face ahead are going to come from the conversations that we have within the sector.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim. Now, we did the first episode together, which was what to expect ahead of this academic year. I think it's fair to say that's probably all been torn up and put in the bin over the last few weeks. It's been, certainly a time of change. Andrew, what are you kind of experiencing at the moment in your trust in terms of the change going on in policy at the moment, the white paper as well? It'd be good to have your thoughts on that.
Well, I think we're in a situation, I think we're a place at the moment where there's great uncertainty. And we have a white paper that we're all thinking, is this still going to happen? But what we do know is that soon we're going to be looking at a number of challenges, and those challenges, particularly in terms of finance, are going to be something that we as a sector have got to really come to terms with. I think that the white paper in essence, I think still stands. And I think actually the challenge for us is not make the mistake of just ignoring, but actually preparing and actually be, I was saying to Matt earlier, being prepared rather than being forced, I think is a really important thing that all of us need to consider carefully, particularly as we sort of look at the storms ahead. And we all know that staffing, the possibility of some issues with colleagues and pay, this could all come really quickly, and it could really challenge and have a number of interesting connotations for us.
Brilliant. And apologies if any background noise is coming through. We do this live for a reason, and Andrew and Tim are both in their workplaces. So any slamming doors or even football boots being banged, which we heard in the prep before opening up this, do apologise, but that's why we go live, I guess. So Tim, as well, you've gone through a period of growth, haven't you, in your trust? What do those next couple of years look like for yourself and the trust, PolyMAT, and how do things impact that as well recently?
Yeah, look, I think certainly it's a time of real uncertainty at the moment. We've obviously got a lot of changes at the centre in government. We've got the financial situation that Andy was talking about. All these things it's tempting to think of them all as just noise, but I think it's really important to filter out the things that are noise and things that are actually things that we should either react to or we should plan around. I think for me, one of the biggest worries at the moment is that it's easy amongst all this uncertainty just to stagnate and just to sit and wait and kind of hope that things might get better or hope that an opportunity might come along. But I think that stagnation is something that we should really strive to avoid within the sector, because the white paper, I think, had a lot of good intent, but there's obviously a lot of uncertainty about whether how much of it will actually push through and come into effect. I think the important thing for us as a sector is to be wary of the things that are going to be dangerous to us, to finance, for example, and really plan around those. But B, actually stick to the things that we know are important for us in the sector, i.e., creating structural change which gives different opportunities for our children and our staff for the long term. I think it's really important for us to look as far ahead as we can in our planning, so that we are thinking about the legacy that we leave, because MAT structures, the trust structures, do have the opportunity to actually deliver really, really different types of education. And I think that we want to keep our eyes fixed upon that as much as possible, whilst at the same time just being really wary of those risky things ahead, particularly the financial situation, which is clearly of major concern, and it's certainly not going to get better this year, I would imagine. But at some point it probably will, and I think that we need to try and look past it if we can.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's certainly the challenge that we're hearing out there as well. It comes down to finances, like a lot of the time at the moment, and every sector, I think, is struggling in some way. So yeah, Andrew, kind of your thoughts on that as well, and what Tim's just mentioned there.
Yeah, I think it's very easy, isn't it, to look at the dark clouds of what's ahead, but actually maybe if we should turn it on our head, what we're very good at in education is looking at the positives. We do it all the time in our day jobs with the young people that we work with, and actually, yes, there's some challenges, yes, there's some issues, yes, there's some uncertainties, but there's also opportunities. There's opportunities to define your organization. There's opportunities to control the things that we can control. And there's opportunities to build partnerships and relationships with colleagues and other trusts. This is really important for us at the moment, because growth is still going to be an issue. And whether we agree with the white paper or we don't agree with the white paper, the essence of what the white paper is talking about is bigger multi-academy trusts, more efficiencies, better working together. Those core things are still, I think, my belief, are still going to be there. And so I think what's important for us is to start to think to ourselves, is this a time to look at our organizations? Is this a time to make sure we've got a really embedded and clear strategy for moving ahead? And that may well be building partnerships with the trusts in terms of services or supply of services. It may be having those conversations with other trusts in terms of growth and working together. I think we've got to, as I say, in the dark clouds, I think we've got to be thinking, come on, let's turn this in a positive way. How can we work in a strategic way to work our way through this?
Brilliant. Yeah, really good points there. And we had a quick chat around kind of SATs, but I'll also include small rural MATs as well. We're looking towards strong trusts is the term used. Not necessarily a hard definition against what is a strong trust, apart from I think some quote kind of pupil numbers. But Andrew, I'm going to come to you and then to Tim. You've been through a MAT summative valuation recently, or have experience around that. How much are they kind of pressing on the topic of whether you're a strong trust or not?
That is the topic.
Yeah.
I think let's be clear. What the summative evaluation is looking at exactly that agenda, and I think I would say to leaders, go back to that summative evaluation that was produced months and months ago, which is a very, very clear indicator of the kind of things that what that strong trust should look like. And I mean, we found, and again, I was on the back of this summative evaluation, so part of the actual feedback. But what that team were looking at was those very clear things. What's your school improvement model? Are you working together as a multi-academy trust? What's your vision and your values? The key is, are you working together to drive improvements across your organisation? And it was very clear that the summative evaluation was looking at those key definitions of what a strong multi-academy trust should be. And to be fair, the team were very open about that. So I think it's back to the point I made earlier. Preparation is important, particularly in times of uncertainty. Reviewing where you are as a multi-academy trust in an organisation, being clear where you're going and why you're going, understanding where the gaps are, and making sure that you're very clear how you're going to fill those gaps.
Brilliant. Tim, your thoughts on that? I don't know if you've been through an evaluation yourself, because recently at a conference we asked everyone in the room to put up the hand if they had been, and I think there was one or two. I think we scared the rest, perhaps. So, Tim, your kind of experience, if any?
Yeah, no, haven't been through one of those. I think, I mean, what Andy is describing there, you know, I think it's right that those things are evaluated, because those are the things that make MATs different from groups of schools working together. You know, they take advantage of the structural opportunities, of the opportunities of scale, and they use those to bring benefits to the individual schools that those schools couldn't get if either they were on their own or they're working in a more loose, kind of flat fashion together. So I think that those are the right things. I mean, the matter, is it still called the matter assurance framework? Is it still called that? But yeah, you know, that is a very, very useful model. I have to say, you know, and I would urge any trust that haven't used it to really use it and evaluate themselves against key areas. I think some of the CST's work on the 5 domains of a strong trust is also very, very useful, because it's really easy, I think, particularly MATs that have recently grown or just kind of starting out, or if you're coming from a SAT, it's very, very easy just to have that model of a single school and think, well, we just scale this model up, but it's really not like that. You know, and I think you really need to look at creating a growth plan that doesn't just improve your schools, but protects them and protects the trust going forward. You know, so you really need to risk assure all the different aspects as you're going forward. But I think that we've got the opportunity now. I mean, Andy was saying, you know, that there are opportunities here, and I think there really are. And one of the things that I've noticed, you know, in the maybe the past 6 months or so, these real periods of uncertainty, is that there was a lot more talk within the sector. People talking to each other, working with each other, looking at ways that they can work together, getting ideas from each other, and that can only be a good thing.
Brilliant. And kind of moving on from change ahead, more onto the growth side of things. Oh, sounds like a disco is going on. Just on to kind of growth, we'll come to you again, Tim. You've onboarded a few schools now at PolyMAT, especially over the last couple of years, from what I understand. What were some of the non-negotiables when onboarding those schools? What were some of the challenges? Be really keen to hear.
Well, actually, Matt, we've only got our 2 schools at the moment, but we're in. But we're in discussions with a number of others, and those questions that you talk about are really important ones. We put a lot of effort into creating our growth strategy, which is a huge document which literally plans growth from now up to 20 schools. But what it does is it tries to preempt all those types of questions that come forward. And I think you've got to have a real mentality of everything you do internally, you design it so that it stands up to scrutiny from external eyes. It's just a really, really good activity to go through. And you do need to have your non-negotiables, but at the same time, you want to be confident that those non-negotiables, are real non-negotiables. They're not just kind of ones for the sake of it, or if you join us, you've got to do it this way or do it that way. You've got to be clear that they're non-negotiables for a reason. And I think the most crucial ones are alignment of vision and alignment of values. But I would stress that the notion of alignment, is one which needs to be a little bit flexible, because there's no point, saying to a school that is potentially coming in, you've got to share you've got to buy in totally to our vision and absolutely align with our values, because the whole process of amalgamation is designed to deal with those things and manage those things. But there has to be a real understanding that there is going to be alignment at some point, and that you're not far off. I think it's really important as well that trusts have a really clear integration framework. So it begins very, very early on. Where you're having your initial discussions, you start with a memorandum of understanding, which should put your non-negotiables on there, because you're saying, are we going to go forward or not? And then that integration framework needs to come all the way to the point of merger, and then needs to go some way into the distance as well. Because harmonization within a trust is a process, and it's a process that I don't think has an end point. But I think these things are incredibly important to plan for. I think probably private sector mergers, are things that we can learn a lot from mergers within the private sector, and about how to make them work. And I think it's something that trusts really needs to plan very carefully before they even start having discussions. Because if you start having discussions with schools that are potentially joining, and you don't know the answers yourself, or haven't thought about the types of questions that are going to come along, then you're going to be creating a trust that just bends and chops and changes and kind of becomes just whatever it becomes. And I think that we'll all know, Andy will know stories about trusts that come together because of things like the heads know each other and like each other and get on. Okay, well, I mean, look, I'm not saying that's not a good starting point, but those people are not going to be there forever. You need to create things that plan for what's going to be there in 5, 10, 15, 20 years when we're not there in our roles. If you start from that point of view and kind of push the personal out of it, I think things become much, much easier. But it's for sure a tricky process, for sure. And it also varies a lot across the country. Probably, sorry, just to finish on that, I know it's a long answer. I think people struggle for two key reasons, but the same word. And the word is politics. One with a big P, one with a small p. The small p to do with the kind of politics to do with the individuals and relationships and so on. But they make it tough, and you've got to be able to navigate that somehow.
Yeah, great answer. And great advice as well. I know definitely that people have leaned on looking at private sector when it comes to, well, an acquisition. It is actually a bit of a commonly used phrase now. I think merger is a bit of a softer word for it, I'm guessing. But the acquisitions that go on in private sector, I know for sure that the first few that went on in the kind of trust space, that's all they could learn from. Mergers weren't put into I think it was Academy Trust Handbook until last year. It was certainly put in there after we ran our first conference on what MAT mergers even were. So, Andrew, you've worked in 2 trusts now. What's your experience around kind of onboarding schools, non-negotiables, and some of the things that Tim just mentioned there?
I think Tim, you said something that I think is really important, and sort of just elaborate that a little bit. Know yourself before you start having those conversations. And I think the lessons I've learned in terms of multi-academy trust growth is there's a panic that I've got to grow, but you never really define yourself, your strategy, and why you want to grow. And I think I give you my bit of advice is make sure you involve your trustees. It's absolutely critical that they are part of, and as Tim, you said, you are there, but for a time as a CEO or trust leader. Actually, the thing that embeds your trust is the trustees, that's the continuity. But spend the time to really think about your organisation and do that honestly, openly, and critically. Use the MAT assurance framework because it's really good, because it's common sense. And from that, develop your strategy, why you want to grow, what kind of schools or organizations you feel would add to your trust. Make sure you're clear about your vision and your values. Then you can start having the conversation. And I'm having a number of conversations at the moment where colleagues, they know that a colleague said to me, I've got to grow. I'm just looking around. And you think, gosh, this is not a good place. What's best for you? What's best for your community, for your students? And therefore prepare yourself. If you're a trust looking to grow, prepare your narrative and make sure people understand, if I become part of this trust, what does that mean? And be really clear and make sure particularly your trustees, your key people in your organisation, they also understand that too.
Yeah, and we just got a question there up on screen. We've got two questions actually just put up, but we'll start with this one because it's probably a little bit shorter to answer than the second one. So, your thoughts on what's appearing on screen there? Does the panel have a view on optimal size of a MAT?
The white paper does, but actually it's about sustainability, isn't it, as an organisation, and it's about being large enough to be able to do the things that a MAT should be able to do in terms of have the resources to drive and improve their schools and work together. The sort of 10 schools, 7,500 youngsters is a rough guidance, but I think if you're in a small community of schools, I think that if you're a group of primary schools in smallest primary schools, that's the 7,500 might be something that is hard to achieve. I think it very much depends on the circumstances. We've got a guidance from the government, from the white paper, but I think it's about the ability for the trust to drive it, to improve its schools. I don't know what your view is on that, Tim.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think that circumstance does have a real impact on size. You can't just use the blunt tool of number of schools or number of students. I think it's really important to try to map out how economies of scale develop and when they become diseconomies of scale as well, and which things actually start to work off against each other. You know, it's pretty clear from a financial point of view that that there's a lot of savings to be made when you scale up. But as you scale up as well, you need to make sure that the things that require a real understanding of the individual needs of individual schools don't get lost in that scaling up. So I think that there will be some things which are notably better at scale, but some things that start to get riskier at scale as well. And you need to plan both those things through. Is my general thought. So, but I don't think that the notion of one particular size of math is helpful.
Yeah, thank you both. There's another one up on screen there. The schools bill currently going through. Some of the detail is concerning for academies and MATs. Any thoughts? Either one of you first. No, it's a tricky one.
There were. I mean, I don't know if Anita's there and can type in which which details she's particularly
Which
concerned
elements?
about. I mean, certainly, I know in the initial phase before it went through the Lords, I think there were certainly some areas of concern regarding accountability and intervention measures from the centre. I think the intervention powers from the centre in the original the original description of the bill were of concern. I think they were very poorly worded, very poorly written, actually. I mean, I think quite embarrassingly so. But I know that various organisations, the CSP, for example, advocated hard to get some changes on there, and some of those changes were taken on board. But I think intervention powers is definitely an area that we as a sector needs to keep a really close eye on.
Andrew.
I would agree. I think, and plus, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the third reading, it's all go on this line.
Yeah, sorry.
It's really exciting. I think the third reading is delayed, isn't it? I think that there is some sort of delay in terms of this particular reading in the bill. I know there's some questions in terms of some of the elements, and again, what I would come back to is the essence of the bill. Let's just talk about the essence. It's about schools and trusts working together, that actually there is a notion that bigger mats, I say 9 schools, 7,500 schools, seem to work more effectively. And I think we've got to, there's things we can control, there's things we can't control. I agree with Tim in terms of intervention. However, the bill, we're not there yet with this bill. But what we do know is that we are going to be challenged to work more effectively within the sector. And if you're a small 2 single academy trust, 2, 3 school academy trust, this is your opportunity to really think carefully about where are we going in terms of our ability to effectively improve outcomes and life chances, work more efficiently in terms of the financial pressures. So I think I think this, to me, this is about taking this opportunity to review your organisation.
Yeah, I think that's a neat as follow up there below as well, when you just asked about which element, Tim. Tim, obviously a 2-school trust as well. I don't know if all trusts as well quite have that growth strategy too, which is where I think, especially in rural areas as well, where you'd actually have to geographically expand and to work with other schools, and they're not quite there yet. I think they'll go through a time of challenge, or I can't remember the phrase that you used earlier, Andrew, but I think it was like prepare before being pushed, which I think is a really good way to put it. But yeah, Tim, I think Anita there has answered a little bit further.
Yeah, I don't, because I would agree with Anita's concerns there. Hopefully, when the bill actually passes into law, we will have some of those issues addressed. And I think what would be great is if they were coming from somewhere. I think it'll probably have to come from within the sector. I don't think it's going to come from the centre. Is real guidance on how effective growth takes place. Yeah. Because from my experience and chatting with other people in the sector, people are growing in all sorts of different ways. Piecemeal by chance. Some have got it well planned out. Some haven't. Opportunities come. Different things happen. I mean, and certainly it's going to mean that mats are going to get bigger. But I think the how is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And to continue on the how, we've got a how question. So thank you for your question. How much strain will the current financial scenario have on spending budget on new teaching and learning resources? Maybe a bit more on the change ahead side of things, but yeah, any thoughts on that?
I think the simple answer is we don't fully know. But what we do know is that financially we're going to be under pressure. And I think, unfortunately, that is going to impact on many things within the school setting. So I think we are moving into a challenging time. We don't know what that's going to mean, and maybe, for example, paid funding will be fully funded by the government, but we don't know. All we know is that we're going to have to be making some hard decisions, and that's again back to the same kind of theme. Why we as trust leaders need to be really thinking carefully about looking at our trusts, how we operate, how effectively we operate, and in some cases actually how we work with other trusts. We may not even be merging. It may be we're just working together to try and be effective in the way that we do some of the things that we do in order to be more financially astute. But I do think we're going to have some challenges ahead. There's no doubt about that.
And how do both of you kind of support your staff and fellow SLT members? How do you support them through times of change as well? Tim, we'll come to you first. When you onboarded that first school, I guess, the head teacher involved and.
Yeah, look. I think actually one of the I hasten to use the word good things, but maybe the silver lining of the past few years is that we've been through so much change in the sector through the pandemic and so on, that actually I think that we are pretty flexible and pretty robust and able to face that. And we haven't had a period of stability for a few years now. So I actually think that facing up to the challenges of this year is not as demanding as it might have been if it hit us 3-4 years ago. I do think that to come back to that question about how tight is money going to be? Well, this year I think across the sector, yes, it's going to be very tight. I don't see anybody within the sector saying that that's not the case. It undoubtedly is. We know that it's not just within education. We know that it's across the country in all government departments. I think one of our key jobs is to firstly be as creative as possible. Secondly, plan as much as possible, and thirdly, protect as much as possible. You've got to protect the things that are most important, so that the financial strain doesn't impact directly on our students wherever possible. But it's absolutely not easy. It's a real challenging thing, particularly because of the timing of the situations as well. I mean, we've had the STPCD confirmed for teachers, but obviously, teaching unions are pushing for more than that. And what was in the STPCD isn't fully funded anyway. We've had the support staff pay rise, which is now payable, which is now being confirmed as well, local government pay award. So that's there as well. But again, the timings of these things, do not coincide well with the setting of trust budgets, and so it's going to be a tricky year. But coming back to Andy's first point, I think that somehow we've got to seek opportunities within this as well, because some of the financial difficulties may force people to have conversations that they wouldn't have had otherwise, that will lead to longer term benefits, not just financial ones, but benefits for the students and for the staff and their organisations. And I think that's the way we've got to look at it.
Brilliant. And just to end, unless there's any other questions that come in the meantime, of course, just kind of finishes off what does need to change. If we're looking in the next year, for example. Tough one.
Go on, Tim.
I think first of all that the financial situation needs to change. I'm not confident that it will, though, but it really does, because it's not a good time. I mean, in time, when you've been in this job long enough, you see the ups and downs of the financial position. So we know that we will come out of it somehow, but it does need to change soon. I think the other thing that I would like to see change is, and this is not an easy thing to change. I would like to see more knowledge-based confidence from those in governance to be able to take advantage of some of the opportunities that are out there for MAT growth and restructuring schools to give real benefits to the students and staff within them. Because I think actually that's where there's a real gap at the moment. You know, I'd love to see more support either from different sector bodies or from the centre for those in governance, so that they really understand that there are opportunities here and not just fears. Because otherwise, I do think we're going to find that within this time of uncertainty, we could easily face a stagnant situation with individual schools or small groups of schools just waiting, hoping that things might get better. And within that time, there could be opportunities that could improve their situation for their students long term. But I think that there's a lot of reticence and nervousness amongst those in governance that are charged with ultimately making those decisions about structural change. I'd love for them to get more support, more knowledge, and more confidence relating to those opportunities.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. I'm sure people find that very useful. Andrew.
I would just support what you said, Tim, on that. I think what I'd like to see changing in the sector is more grown-up and honest conversations between schools and school leaders.
Yeah.
And that is from governance right the way through to trust leader CEOs, so that actually let's put ego secondary to the well-being of the young people that we serve. And I think if we can start having those conversations about what's the best thing to do, I think maybe we can progress. And Tim, you're absolutely right. Putting your fingers in your ears, all that's going to do is mean that eventually the decision that you'll eventually have to make will be harder. Actually, we need to be talking to each other. How can we work together? What is best for us? Maybe it is the right thing for this trust to be part of this trust. And I think if we can have those grown-up conversations, and sometimes we don't, because we sit in a room and it's, so who's going to be in charge then, rather than actually what is best for this community. And I think that for me is the biggest thing that we need to try and address. It's a hard one. If you've worked hard in your trust to build your trust, and it's a 2-3 school MAT or a 4 school MAT or whatever, and you think actually realistically this is an option for us. But I think honesty, openness would and grown-up conversations, I think is and what is best for the communities and the children that we serve, I think would be my big thing.
Definitely. Any other kind of closing comments, Tim, Andrew?
I would just, yes, there's challenges, but in challenges there's always opportunities. And I think, Tim, you made a point. We as teachers and educationalists, we're very flexible, we're very resourceful, we're very creative. Well, challenging times sometimes bring the best out of us. And I think we should look at this time as a chance to look again at our own organisations, but also look outward, and let's use this time as an opportunity, because the storm may come, but the storm will end at some point.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, I think that school and trust leaders should view this as something that they're used to. In other words, it's just another crisis. There'll be another one along at some point in the future. This is just what we do, and we make the best of it, and we seek opportunity.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, well, thank you. We did end it on a positive note, which can be tough. So thank you very much for everyone attending, and thank you to the few that had a question as well. Hopefully you've all found that useful. We'll be back again on the 23rd of November for the next edition, which I believe is going to be around developing your people. So thank you very much, Tim, Andrew, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Cheers.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.